Hello and thank you for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's Morning Briefing. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu's deadline for forming a government is now just a day away, and with no feasible prospects in the works, Netanyahu is staying true to his word by returning the mandate back to President RIVLIN. But taking to social media on Monday, as he marked his 70th birthday, Netanyahu is blaming rivals Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid, and Avigdor Lieberman for his failure to form a coalition. A unity coalition that the Prime Minister still asserts can come about. For now, though, with Netanyahu twice failing to negotiate a coalition, Blue and White or Kahol Lavan chairman Benny Gantz will get the chance to put together a ruling government for himself. The question is, are his chances any better than Netanyahu's? Well, with just 28 days to do it, Kahol Lavan already announced that the time for spin is over, and Blue and White is determined to form the liberal unity government headed by Gantz that the nation chose a month ago. But the numbers still tell another story. Lieberman and his Israel Beitenu party have yet to pledge support for anyone, leaving 8 seats unaccounted for. Then you have the left-wing and Arab parties for a total of 54, not including the 3 Arab MKs who refused to support Gantz. So without Lieberman and all of the left-wing and Arab parties who are unlikely to come together, Gantz falls short of the 61 majority he needs. The only other option then is to look across the aisle and attempt to poach parties from the right-wing bloc. But the right-wing and ultra-Orthodox parties have already formed a bloc of 55 seats behind Netanyahu, pledging not to budge for what the Prime Minister calls a minority government. Time will tell then if any compromise can come about, or if landmark third elections are on the horizon. Coming from Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin called on Monday to congratulate Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu over his 70 years on Earth, returning the favor in a sense after Netanyahu called to wish Putin a happy birthday when he was turning 67 in early October. But the two leaders didn't just discuss their favorite cake flavors and gifts. Officially, Putin and Netanyahu discussed bilateral challenges and the deteriorating situation unfolding in eastern Syria. But unofficially, the two talked about Naama Issachar, and officials familiar with the phone call confirmed that Issachar was brought up after Netanyahu sent a formal pardon request last week. The 26-year-old Naama was arrested during a stopover in Moscow last April on charges of drug trafficking. She had a little under 10 grams of cannabis in her bags as she was making her way back to Israel from India. And last week, she was sentenced to 7.5 years in Russian prison. But that's a far harsher sentence than usual. That's why it's widely believed that Moscow is holding the Israeli-American Issachar as a political prisoner in order to leverage the return of Russian hacker Alexei Burkov. Burkov, who is also widely thought to be a Russian intelligence agent, is currently set for extradition to the United States for embezzlement charges. What we still don't yet know, then, is what will come of Burkov and Issachar, as at this time there is still no decision. The olive harvest is usually a time of pride and joy in the West Bank and in Israel, as neighboring Israelis and Palestinians come together to celebrate the harvest bounty. But not this year, because a series of extremist attacks, thefts, and acts of vandalism is disrupting the activities. And in fact, even IDF soldiers are getting attacked now, as residents from the Israeli settlement of Yitzchar and nearby outposts continue to inflame tensions. This most recent unrest began last week, though, when a gang of masked settlers assaulted and robbed a group of activists who were assisting the Palestinians' olive harvest. And victims included 3 Palestinian farmers who were hospitalized and an 80-year-old rabbi. Then that same evening, Israeli security forces arrested an Israeli teen suspected of starting a fire in another Palestinian-owned field. And 2 days later, on Friday, when the arson suspect was released to house arrest, a second suspect was arrested near Yitzchar for allegedly threatening an Israeli Golani brigade commander. But Yitzchar's settlement leaders blasted the IDF, saying that the soldiers trampled on individual rights and the sanctity of the Sabbath by conducting the arrests on a Friday. And this is ultimately what led to the clashes early Sunday morning, where border police were attacked by some 30 settlers who threw stones and punctured tires, followed by Monday, where 10 Israeli residents of the area started throwing rocks and bottles of paint at border police too, injuring 1 soldier on duty. And finally, in the meantime, leaders across the spectrum are calling on the government to do more against this terror, saying that it should be dealt with strongly and nipped in the bud. Escaping Nazi Europe, jailed in Eritrea, and saying no means no on the stand long before the Me Too movement, you could say that Meir Shamgar was a trailblazer. As Supreme Court President, Attorney General, and IDF Military Advocate General, Shamgar redefined nearly every legal administration in the State of Israel as we know it today. In the 1960s, he elevated the position of IDF Chief Lawyer from answering to the Army Chief of Staff to working directly with the Attorney General. And Shamgar was an integral part of holding on to the West Bank while adding in provisions to limit the state from taking advantage, making it possible for Palestinians without Israeli citizenship to have the right to appeal IDF West Bank court rulings. Then Shamgar handled the controversial case of John Demjanjuk, who said he was being wrongfully identified as Ivan the Terrible, another Slavic Nazi guard who was notorious for torturing victims at concentration camps while they were on their way to gas chambers. And Shamgar also led the inquiry in the aftermath from the 1995 assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. The leader was born in 1925 in what is today Poland, immigrated to Israel in 1939, and enlisted himself in the Irgun, in early Zionist military resistance. And that got him sent to prison in East Africa at the hands of the Brits. In 1993, Shamgar overturned a Haifa District Court decision in a landmark case that nearly let a handful of boys off scot-free for sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl, and he said that there is no no, which actually means yes. And finally, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President RIVLIN eulogized the pioneer Tuesday at his funeral in Jerusalem. Shamgar was 94 when he died on Saturday, October 19th, 2019.
That's all for now, so follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and of course on Instagram. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.